Endurance Junkie Podcast, episode 55. Hey Junkie, welcome to another episode of the Endurance Junkie Podcast, the show where I will be interviewing some of the fastest, smartest, and most inspiring people active in the endurance world today. Devon Yanko is a trail, road, and ultra runner who has been racing competitively in ultras and marathons around the world since 2005. She sort of took a break from elite running in 2012 to focus on the start of MH Bread and Butter, a bakery cafe she co-owns with her husband in San Anselmo, California. But she returned to the elite level in 2015 with an impressive win at the Javelina 100, a third place at Western States in 2016, a top 10 at the Comrades Marathon in South Africa earlier this year, and most recent, a victory at the Leadville 100. Alright, hi Devon, thanks for taking the time to come on the show here. Now for those of us who don't know you, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your sporting background growing up, and how you ended up in ultra running?
That's a big, broad question. I've been athletic my whole life. I was not a runner in high school as a sport. I was really into running, but I was primarily a basketball player. I love basketball. I went to college on a basketball scholarship, but I did run a lot in training. So in high school, I ran a half marathon. My sister played soccer, and I used to go for runs that were as long as her soccer games, but I didn't ever identify as a runner. And then when I stopped playing basketball after my freshman year of college, I took a break because I had a bad injury from basketball, and I was living overseas, and I had started kind of running a couple days a week, and my roommates invited me to start training with them, and we ran a half marathon during our study abroad in South Africa. We were living in Cape Town. And after that, it just kind of like reignited everything I loved about running in high school, which in high school, it was very much just my own thing, whereas basketball was this huge source of stress and competition and aspiring, and all of these people having, influence on that. Like running was just mine. And I started out running again just for myself. And after that first half marathon, I was like, I think I like this distance stuff. And I was really undertrained. I ran like 2 hours for the half marathon. And I came back home and started running with my sister so that she could run her first half marathon. And 2 years later, I ran my first marathon. It just kind of like escalated pretty fast. I've always been drawn towards the longer distances. And 14 months after my first marathon, I ran my first ultra. So I did my first marathon in 2005 and my first ultra in 2006. And it was before being 20 something and running ultras was cool. I was just like, I crossed the finish line in my first race and people were like, wait, no, why are you doing this? You're so young. And I was like, I don't know. That was really fun.
So that when you were playing basketball, the running was never about getting fitter for your basketball games. It was just, pure for fun. You were going out and just killing time and just enjoying your running.
I definitely, we did track workouts and stuff for fitness, but I was probably running between 40 and 50 miles a week. And that really didn't, that kind of endurance, I'm sure it did benefit it. But when I was going out and doing it, I wasn't thinking about it in that way. I was just doing it and be like, I have some energy I need to burn off somehow because I was working out 8 to 10 hours a day. I just want to go do this thing. And it kind of I didn't really nobody knew I was running. It was just so personal that it just I knew it helped my fitness, but I didn't correlate it that way.
So then, you ran that first marathon, you ran that first ultra, so you were hooked pretty fast. When did you realize that you were sort of getting good at it and that you could reach, sort of an elite level in the sport?
Well, my first marathon, I qualified for Boston, and at the time I didn't somebody told me that after the fact, and I had I was like, okay, I don't know what that means. My first marathon was a 3:38, and I ran another marathon 3 months later and ran a 3:22. And within a year, I had run a 3:06.
So what's the standards for qualifying for Boston?
At the time, it was 3:40 for my age group. So I was 21 or something. And, I was like, I was like second in my third marathon ever. And I was like, okay, clearly I have some potential here, but I'm not like blowing anybody's mind here. I'm not like going to go to the Olympics. But when I did my first ultra, it was the national championship, and I was seventh in a really stacked field. And like, I had no idea what I was doing. All I knew was you get to walk uphill if you want, and you get to eat snacks at the aid stations and drink Coke. And like, I just had so much fun. And when I crossed the finish line, two really well-known ultra runners of all time, Nikki Kimball and Connie Gardner, like, they met me at the finish line. They're like, "Who are you? You should come run on the 100K team." And I was like, okay. Like, I have no idea what that means. And so I went out. That was August of 2006. And in February of 2007, I ran like my second 50K, and I set the course record and ran one of like my fast, like one of the I think it's still on like the top, one of the top lists for 50K times. Like, it was like I ran like a 3:32 for a 50K in my second race. And then I qualified. I was second in the national championships at the 100K road, qualifying for my first 100K team. So at that point, I was like, I think I have some talent, but I also liked it because like every time you line up for an ultra, it's not just about time. And that's why I had shifted away from the marathon, is because I was afraid that my own competitive nature I might eventually get hung up in like just this arbitrary time, like it's all well and good when you're PRing every race, but eventually you're going to stop PRing every race. And so I just didn't want to tie up my running with that outcome. And in ultras, like, you can really just pick. I mean, the way I pick races is like, I go, how do I want to challenge myself? Like, have I been doing one style of race? Like, let me shift gears and go over and do something else. And, I've had success on like all sorts of distances and all sorts of surfaces. And so like, I mean, it was my first year that I had some, really good success. So.
And up until then, were you just coaching yourself, or were you was somebody taking care of you and writing training plans and everything?
I mean, I ran my first marathon on a Runner's World plan that I downloaded off the internet and like hand wrote. I was living in London at the time, and I like hand wrote it on a piece of paper and taped it up on my wall. And I got a coach. My coach, the coach that I worked with at the beginning, it was probably like 3 or 4 years into when I had started running. He was one of my teammates on the 100K team. His name was Howard Nippert. And then eventually I transitioned to my current coach, Ian Torrance, who works with Macmillan Running. And we've been working together pretty much for the past 4 or 5 years.
Okay. So how do you go about then creating your year plan and picking the events that you want to do? I mean, you said you wanted to see how you can challenge yourself. Is that the main factor?
Yeah, I mean, it really, like, I kind of just look at what's inspiring me and like what kind of races I'm really interested in. I mean, over the years, like, I obviously get more opportunities because of, like, I'm sponsored by Hoka and Oiselle, and like they have races and opportunities and things that are important to them. And because of like my success in the sport, like internationally, I could just go, what do I want to do? And so like, I really pick, like, just, I race best when I'm like really passionate about a race. I have had like a running bucket list since I start, like before I did my first marathon, I had like it was totally arbitrary at the time. It was like Western States and Leadville, and I'm like, didn't even really know what ultra running was. But I picked races off of kind of like what I'm most excited about. So like this year, I wanted to go back to 2 Oceans and Comrades, and
Because that's something completely different than trail running, right?
Yeah, and both of those races are in South Africa, so it involves a lot of race. And they're the most competitive race, like ultras, because it's road and it's really fast. I mean, it was like an Olympian won 2 Oceans this year. And so like, I really like that side where competing in those races, it's super competitive. They're really like, the country really, everybody knows what those races are. They're good, like Comrades especially is like really my sweet spot in distance. And I've been trying to go back to Comrades since I did it for the first time in 2012. But because we opened the bakery, I haven't like been able to jet set off to South Africa for a couple of years. So it was like this year was kind of the opportunity to do that. And because I had my first injury last fall that in basically my whole career, when I was coming back, I was relegated to running like flat road. And so, based on that, I wasn't like super keen to just get on trails because my foot and ankle problem was exacerbated. Like every time I stepped on a route, it was like, this could be catastrophic. So I just kind of built my schedule off of like, can I do these things while I'm transitioning back? And both 2 Oceans and Comrades turned out really well for like where I was in my training. Like I'm super happy with them, but I wasn't in peak form at all. So it was like, I was more like, hey, my foot didn't hurt the whole time. That's amazing. So yeah.
You mentioned the bakery there. So I think you opened that in 2012 together with your husband.
Yeah. 13,
yeah. How do you combine that? I mean, it's my parents own the bakery, so I know you have to put in a lot of hours. So how do you combine that with training for ultra marathons?
Well, for the first couple of years, it was pretty much impossible. I ran a lot of marathons between May of 2013 and September of 2015. I think I ran like 20 marathons because it was like, I get one day off. So I'm just going to go somewhere, like I get a short weekend off and I would run a marathon. Yeah. But it was also like, I would pretty much could just run the same kind of time no matter what I did because I was doing the training, but I was just so overtired from working 100 hours a week at the time. So our bakery is very big, full cafe. We have like over 30 employees. So the first couple of years, it was like my husband and I were working all the time, and he taught me how to bake. He's the passionate baker, and I was a personal chef before and into food, but baking is like his thing. Like he is a bread geek. He loves bread, and I'm like, whatever. So and because of that, like, that's why we chose to do kind of like the style he was already into and like very skilled at, and, very traditional, like croissants and things like that. But we were working all the time, and like our break for that, we'd work for 10 hours and then go for runs. I was still running like, 70 to 90 miles a week when we were first open, but you can't really, like, I don't think people understand, like, you just cannot access a part of your fitness when you're just so tired. Like, you can run. Like, I ran with a friend this morning, and like, she said she's just like really tired, and like, she was fine. And then when we started like the workout portion of our run, it was like, just like, nope, don't have that gear. And so I kind of existed in that space for 2 years, because the specific, like, finding bakers is the hardest, like one of the hardest parts, and staffing, especially where we live, is just difficult. So in fall of 2015, I had been on the night shift 7 days a week for a year. We had been doing a pastry wholesale program, and I was working by myself 7 days a week at night. And finally I was like, I can't do this. I cannot do this. This program is not the right thing for us. Like, I need to, like, we are the business owners. Like, we need to have boundaries. And so I decided to transition off the baking side, and like, we got better staffing. And so at that point, that's when I went to South Africa to run. I ran the Cape Town Marathon, and then Ultra Trail Cape Town. I did like a really technical 100K in freezing cold, pouring rain on marathon training. It was super, but I finished. And that was like my first ultra since Chuckanut 2013. So, but at that point, I kind of transitioned it just into the role of like doing the business side, which I had been doing on top of baking, and because small business ownership is that you just, as you know, you do it all. So, I mean, now it's a lot easier just because I don't have a set schedule when it comes to the bakery. So I have the flexibility too.
Yeah, so you found a new balance there to work at running. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you mentioned the bucket list as well. So, I mean, yeah, we saw 2 Oceans and Comrades. You've done Western States, I think, last year. Now Leadville. Yeah, what else is on there?
I've been like racking my brain, be like, okay, what's the next thing? And right now, I kind of feel like some of the things that are on my bucket list are more adventure type stuff than races. I'd like love to do the whole TRT. And like, when I say that, I'm not like, and run the fastest time. Like I don't know if I want to run that far hard. I would rather do like the run 50 miles a day for 4 days and eat pizza between stops or whatever. I would love, I was watching the whole UTMB race festival this weekend, and like it's kind of like North Face 50 in the Bay Area here, where like every year, like I'm really into spectating it, but like there's something that it tempers my enthusiasm. Like I would love to go run around Mont Blanc and eat and stop at the huts and eat cheese and drink wine. I mean, I'm sure I could do that in the race, but it probably would make for a different experience. So like I love the environment. I've met the race directors. I have plenty of friends who have done it, plenty of friends who did it this year. I just think that like where I am with my running right now, it's not the kind of like it's on there for like the future bucket list. It's just not like I want to go do it next year.
Leadville was on your bucket list, I think, since the beginning of when you started running. So you ran it this year for the first time. You won it. Did it live up to expectation?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to get to that start line. This is the 3rd time I've been signed up. Last year, I did Western States at the end of June, and then I was signed up for Leadville. And I went out to Colorado to try to adapt to the altitude, because you cannot come from sea level and just show up and expect to run well. That's highly likely to not work out well. So I had gone up there last year, and I basically just felt like I was like digging my own grave. Like every day I'd go for my runs and I get back to my friend's house and I'd just be like, I think I might eventually just die from altitude. I'm so tired. And so I made the hard choice to not race. And I didn't roll over my registration. I was just like, I'm just going to let it go and it'll come back to me when it's ready, because I have so much respect for it, that I didn't want to, like, I knew it would take like very specific set of circumstances to get there. So this year after I did Comrades, I came back and I was like feeling pretty good. And, because I had an injury, I basically have only been running, like I started racing in March. And so, I felt like I'm earlier in my season than maybe usually I would be. So came back from Comrades feeling pretty fit, and I went to Mammoth Lakes. They have a house there that they let professional athletes come and stay at. It's called Mammoth Lakes Cribs. And they're pretty high altitude, and I was feeling pretty good. So I had this thought in my head to sign up for Silver Rush 50, which is one of the Leadville races. And so I was like, why don't I give it a go? So I signed up for that, and I headed out to Colorado. Unfortunately, I had sprained my ankle that week. Like my bad foot, I had stepped on a root and then turned out that Silver Rush was pretty rocky. So I started that race, and I didn't go there with the intention of, you can win your way into Leadville with that race. You get like this, it's a token race. And that was not my intention. But like once I was there, and there, like the series of races is really community oriented, and like it really is about supporting the town of Leadville and the, you know, economic viability of Leadville, and just like all the volunteers and everybody who's there. And, you know, like I see all these people I know. And so I got it in my head that I wanted to run Leadville. And thankfully for me, GU is a sponsor of Leadville, and I just was like trying to figure out ways to get in, and they had one sponsor spot left, and so they let me race for them. So I signed up like 6 weeks before Leadville.
There's plenty of time to get ready for that. Yeah.
I was like, hopefully this I feel good at altitude thing will just keep rolling. And so when I came home from Silver Rush, like the ankle situation was fine. Like it was literally, I just had to stop stepping on rocks. And so I had, like, we slept in, we have an altitude tent. So I did that. And then I did my peak week of training. I went out to Colorado, and actually trained on the course again. So I really realized like what it was going to take in terms of approach and strategy for me to make it through Leadville. And it was a really competitive race. I mean, at least like the list of starters and the women who started is probably one of the more competitive. I think it's probably the most competitive field it's ever been. So like I went into it knowing that I just had to run my race and not go out too fast as some people in the field did, and just like let the race go and run my race according to how I know I could handle that altitude. Because I mean, I don't know how to translate it to meters, but it's a lot of meters. 10,200 feet is like the town of Leadville, and you don't really go lower than that. So that's a lot of stress on your body.
Yeah, and it worked out well because you obviously won the race. Do you see that as your biggest accomplishment so far in your career, or am I wrong there?
I mean, I would say that personally, like it's probably the most proud I've ever been of a race. Like I can't think of enough. Like I've won plenty of big races. You know, I've been to the Olympic trials in the marathon. Like I've been on a lot of big stages, but Leadville was especially a big deal for me because I ran it in the way that I wanted to. So like, I'm really proud of like the person that I was during the race, you know, like how happy I was and like the perspective I was able to have. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, and I mean, just like for how long it's meant so much to me, like it's really cool to kind of go into that race, especially one that's like so notoriously hard to nail, like to, you know, win it on my first try is like really awesome.
I think your mantra there was work the problem. This is something that you use quite often. Did you have to use it a lot during the race?
You know, honestly, this time I didn't actually have to use that very often because like I felt like, one, mentally I stayed out of kind of like this deep, dark, scary place that I have in the past liked to just dive headfirst into. And we all know that when you go into a negative self place, like how that works out for you while racing. And also how it like makes you approach problems. If you're feeling negative and then something happens, you tend to like be like, and it's the end of the world. And so I chose to keep the perspective. Well, first of all, I ran really smart. Like the whole first 40 miles, I was like, my goal is to have my heart rate at, if somebody were to take my pulse, they would think I was dead, kind of like I'm running so comfortable that like there were no problems. It was more like just trying to get to the hard part, or you're like and like the first time I had an issue, I had two issues like right back to back, right at Twin Lakes, which is mile 40 before you go over Hope Pass the first time. I took a hot shot. I don't know if you know what that is. Hot shot is essentially, it's basically like a drink that's made out of cayenne, and it's supposed to help with cramping. And because I was going up a steep climb, like usually I can stomach them pretty well, but I think it was like just how dry altitude makes you. So that did not go down well. So like all of a sudden I was just like, oh, stomach was not happy about that. And then I started climbing Hope Pass, which I've done a lot of times in training. Like I know how hard it is. I know how like much it sucks, and how it's just basically like on a good day, like fast walking, and on a bad day, slow walking. And right as I kind of started going up the climb, I got really dizzy and like really low energy, which obviously is not good when you're trying to climb up to 12,000 feet or whatever. But instead of like losing my perspective or freaking out about it, I actually just yelled out loud, "Plot twist," because I like was thinking about it like, this is just something that's happening. Ooh, it's interesting now. And like, then I just kind of started laughing, and like, I was still taking in like the whole race, like my ability to take in nutrition was great. I mean, my second pacer, well, we were like 2 miles from the finish line, and she gave me a goo, and she actually works for goo. And she was like, I don't even know how you were still eating goo at this point. Like, cause the whole race, I just took Roctane goo and candy basically. And like, it's like unprecedented to just be like, all right, another gel down the hatch. So like that, when that issue happened, it was just like, okay, just keep taking in calories. And I just was like, all I know is just keep moving forward. Like it will change. And like, there's really nothing like worrying about it can do. So that kind of perspective is what I had no matter what was coming up during the race. And I managed to maintain that throughout. So I was pretty happy with that. And like once it's an out and back race, so once I was heading back, like I could even focus my attention on like the other racers. So it's like people who are just coming over the pass for the first time, and I'm going back up the second time. Like every single person, I was like, "You're doing great, and you're doing great, and you're awesome." And they were all like, "But you're like," I was in second place at the time, and they're all like, "But you're doing great." And I was like, but feeding on that energy and just kind of like, lifting everybody up, it just helps to detract from that kind of like being like, I'm running 100 miles and that's really far and this is really hard. So I was super happy with that.
Congrats again. Let's take it to the other side of the spectrum. What has been your biggest disappointment so far?
Biggest disappointment so far.
Could be that there's none.
I mean, this year I had an incident that was pretty, I mean, when it came to running, is probably the worst I've ever felt, which was I did this relay from LA to Vegas with Oiselle. It's this thing called the Speed Project. It's a 6-person ultra relay. And like, it was just rough for me because it turns out I had broken my foot the day before I went to do it. So like from the start, I'm like freaked out about that because I don't know what's going on with my foot that I had been injured. And so like I have a new problem in it. Like I was like, we didn't know very much about any of the logistics or what was going on. So like there was that part of stress. I had my own personal life stress. Like I don't like where I was in my injury and all that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, I got food poisoning while we were out there. So like I couldn't run. And then I ended up having to be taken to the hospital while we were in the middle of Death Valley. So I'm not only not running, and I'm like literally just detracting from the team. And so like the whole thing, I just am like, it just kind of horrifies me. Not like I didn't do anything on purpose, but like I went to be a part of the team and I ended up just being like not able to help. So that was pretty low. I would say the first time I started Western States in 2009. That one definitely made me feel the worst for the longest amount of time. I went into that race, always a lot of hype. And I was still really young in the sport. And I very much went there because everybody said I was supposed to. And I was kind of I don't even think I like running 100 miles. And so and at that time, I had kind of stopped training in a way that I think works best for me. So I kind of bought into went all into what everybody else says I should be doing, a lot of just long, slow distance and, wanting to run Western states. And so I was I don't think I was as fit as I have been since. And I also had never run in the heat. And so I don't know if you allow swearing, but I was basically a shit show. And I ended up actually getting pulled out of the race for kidney failure at Michigan Bluff. And so it's it's not just having a bad race. It's in hindsight, over many years, kind of examining that, it was I had kind of abandoned my own core principles about why I run and let myself give in to external influence, and then tried to run 100 miles in a competitive situation in the heat. And it just really did not go well for me.
Well, okay. You see that you learn as you go along, and you've managed to turn things around. So well done there. Well, thanks for your time, Devon. So we're about at the 30-minute mark. So I'll let you plug some sponsors if you have some.
I really appreciate working with Hoka and Wazelle. They are awesome. And yeah, we'll go there.
Okay. How can people get in touch with you if they want to?
I'm on Twitter. It's Fast Foodie, but there's an underscore in between there. I'm on Instagram. It's Fast Foodie with no underscore. I'm not on Facebook, so if you try to friend me I am on Facebook, but I'm not friends with people on Facebook. So if you try to find me on Facebook and I don't accept your friend request, don't feel bad.
Okay. Well, there's a website as well, I think, so I'll put that in the show notes on our own website, so people can link to that. Besides the bakery, anything else you want to plug? Or the bakery, of course.
My bakery, it's called MH Bread and Butter. It's in San Anselmo, California, which is Marin County, north of San Francisco.
All right. Awesome. Last question. What are your plans for the rest of the day?
I have to do homework because I'm currently doing a post-bac before I start an MBA program in January. So homework.
All right. Training's done already for the day?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Well, good luck with that. Enjoy your studying, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you so much.